According to our next guest, hearing God's voice is easy. You don't need to wait for someone else to give you a word. You can hear from God every day for yourself, and you don't need to be super spiritual to do it. He speaks to all of us. He is promoting his new book, God, Please Talk to Me. Let's welcome Pastor Dwight Fletcher to share more. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise, Pastor
Thank you
Dwight,
very much.
as you said.
Yeah, man, I prefer Pastor Dwight.
Yes, it's a very interesting title here.
Right.
And it will spark different conversations based on who is looking at it.
At the title,
and yes. It also would be spoken from different perspectives, based on, again, your understanding and perception of God and your own relationship with God. Right. Why such a title?
I think...
And how did it come about?
And how did it come about?
Yes.
Okay. So, let me give you a little story. When I was very young in my walk in the faith, I used to hear older Christians say, God said. And I used to go to them and ask them, what do you mean God said? And how do I hear God? And I could not get a definitive answer. So I started to search for the answer. And I discovered, as they say, God, it is easy to hear from God. You just need to get the hang of it. So the title of the book is, I think, the cry of many people's hearts. God, please talk to me. And they are desperate for that voice, but they don't understand how to grasp the voice. Right. And we explain it in the book.
It's very interesting that you've started with that particular story, because somebody said to you, boy, you know, God gave me a message to give you. And I said, but if God can speak to you and give you a message to give to me, why couldn't God come to me to give me the very same message? And oftentimes people don't understand it, as you say, and then rely on the pastor to be the oracle through which that message is delivered. I mean, isn't that problematic, though?
So you have to look at this thing in balance. The truth is that we are a community of believers, and each one has something that the other one needs. And sometimes God can want to speak to you, but your receiver is not hearing well, or the message he wants to say to you, you find it difficult to hear. And sometimes he uses somebody else because they are your brother to come and say to you so and so and so. However, I am agreeing with you that in general, we should develop that ability to hear the Lord, and that is an ability born out of a relationship with God.
So how do you reconnect from your own perspective? How do you reconnect to the source? Because that's the disconnect, where the disconnect is. How do you now reconnect to the source and know what to listen for, how to listen, and when to listen?
So from our perspective, God is speaking all the time. And his voice is heard from the point of view of a relationship. When you have a relationship, a growing relationship with the Lord, it opens your receptivity to his voice. So it's born out of relationship. It's born out of being born again, because that opens the relationship with the Lord. And then in that relationship, if you start to know what to listen for and how he speaks, it becomes easier to hear. When you were younger, were you ever in a crowd and everybody's mother could be calling other people and your mother called, and in the noise, you heard your mother?
Well, I'll give you a different perspective, but I understand what you're asking. The perfect example is way back when in St. James, when my grandfather was in a particular situation, and he called me, but I could hear it intuitively. But I didn't understand it, so I heard the calling maybe 3 times, and I said I wouldn't disobey it the 3rd time. And so when I went, I realized that there was an emergency. The next day he said, you know how many times I called you? But I didn't literally hear it. Audibly from, physically, just like that. I mean, it was a spiritual intuitiveness, if there's such a word. So how do we now know that we must obey that nudge, that sound? Because it's not a voice which says, Adrian, get up and walk next door.
Not necessarily.
That's not what it really is.
No, not necessarily, but continue.
But how do you now hear it And a lot of people question it,
Right.
but then don't obey it, and then the opposite happens.
Right, right. So that's what we are trying to cover in the book.
Yes.
We are trying to help persons to recognize, well, there are different voices,
Yes.
to help to discern which voice is the Lord's
listen for.
voice. And then once we are able to discern it, we have to learn now to be more receptive to it. And then when you start to obey it, then your faith grows and you hear more. Right. So it is a process of learning. It's not like one day you just wake up and you are all, bing. You know, there is a process of growing and learning. And what we do is we cover various scenarios and various approaches so that persons can be more equipped in hearing well.
But if we're all made from the image and likeness of God, meaning the same qualities, not physically, but the same qualities, love, light, joy, peace, all that is good. Why then it is so difficult for many people to be disconnected from it if within the kingdom there lies? And I can get in touch with it, be attuned to the goodness of its message. But oftentimes we hear it and we say, boy, I don't know, yeah. And how do we maintain it?
Right. So in the West, we have learned to be very rational.
Yes.
1 and 1 always equals 2, right? And
So
we are very logical in our approach. The way God speaks is not in that line. The way God speaks is more artistic. It can come as a feeling like a suggestion.
Yeah.
It cannot be as tangible as hearing. And then when we hear about hearing, we expect to hear audibly. And God really speaks on the inside of us. And we have to get used to that. So, and then, as I said before, it is based on relationship. If you have no relationship with the Lord can speak to you, but it's more rare than usual. Right.
Many people might say, Pastor Dwight, I don't agree with it this morning. But again, it boils down to the relationship.
It boils down to relationship.
Your consciousness, your level of consciousness. So at the end of the day, though, what's the... Because people are going to say, listen, I'm not a Christian, and so I don't think I'll be able to hear from God. There are Christians who will say, well, if you were not baptized in the name of Jesus and washed in his blood, then you're not going to hear nothing. And then people are not going to know what to listen for.
Right.
How do we move past that? Because there are many people who are spiritual but not necessarily Christians.
Right, right. It's an interesting question. There's a man in the Bible by the name of Abimelech.
Yes.
He had Abraham's wife in his harem. He took her. Abraham lied and told him that she was his sister. And the Lord appeared to him and said, get this woman out of your harem, because if you touch her, I will kill you. Straight. But Abimelech heard that for his own rescue. But as I've been saying, he didn't have a relationship with the Lord. So he can't expect to go to bed tomorrow and hear with that clarity. Those who are born of the Lord are the sons of God. And when we are in that son-father relationship, the expectation I have is much greater because it's now my Father speaking to me. It's as if your mother had a relationship with you and she spoke to you all the time, but the neighbors around, she might say something to them, but she doesn't speak with the same clarity and with the same amount of very definitively speak to them. She speaks to them maybe occasionally. And when you're not Christian, the Lord speaks to us to pull us towards him. He speaks to us about his goodness, he warns us, and so forth. But that all the while is to say, come into a closer relationship with me. You are too far.
So how do you cultivate that relationship with God based on what has been documented in the book? Because there are people who just believe that they won't hear from God because they are not a part of Christendom.
Right, and I'm saying to you that they will not hear from God in the way that this book suggests. Because the way this book suggests, it is for persons who have a growing relationship with the Lord. And in that growing relationship, the Lord says, my sheep hear my voice, and they will not follow another. Right? So in that relationship, they are going to grasp his word in a much easier and clearer manner, because the Spirit of God lives inside of them and speaks to them from within.
If we only knew that, if we only could embrace that and accept it as our truth, that the Spirit of God dwells within, and we can call on it any time, and that God is not existing outside of us. It's somewhere up there in the cloud, and when we call on him, that's the time he appears. That's a kind of notion that I think many people have been trying to figure out. How do they move past that kind of belief that has been probably given to us from God he knows when.
I hear you.
So how can people get copies of this book? Where is it available, and probably with the cost?
Well, it's available locally at major book distributors, Sangsters, and Brand's Bookstore. We are working on 2 other major distributors. Online, it's available on Amazon, and both in Kindle and in paperback. Amazon, the price is $15.99 US for the paperback, $9.99 for the Kindle, and locally is $2,500 at our local bookstores.
Okay. Pastor Dwight, what is the one message that you'd like to leave with our viewers when it comes to cultivating that relationship with God and listening and obeying
his voice?
Yes.
When we listen and obey his voice, God makes us more receptive to him and more successful in everything that we touch. He will speak to you in your relationships with him, your relationship with your husband or wife, your business, and that relationship just elevates your success rate in life, builds your faith, changes your life.
When you also live from a place of gratitude.
When you also live from a place of gratitude.
Thank you so much, Pastor Dwight. We appreciate it. All the very best, and thanks for sharing